Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Aliens and UFOs video. Well, it definitely seems like out of all the encounter videos that I'm doing between the Mafia and Gangsters and the Cryptids and Monsters and these Aliens UFO ones definitely seem to be the most popular ones. Lots of great views, good comments, likes as well. And again, I'm having a bunch of fun talking about them here, so why not? Why not continue associating these encounters with another video here, 3 of them to be specific, and then I'll give my own thoughts on them afterward. As always, this comes from the reddit.com website. There's a subreddit there called The Truth Is Here. And with these 3 cases, we'll start with this first one here that comes from a user by the name of Throwaway 547239. Interesting name, no? Seems like it's obviously like a throwaway user ID, but they called it. I saw something in the sky I couldn't explain 6 months ago, and now my mom saw it too. Pretty much it tells the story right there, no? So let's go ahead and let's talk about this first case, and then I'll to the other ones and then give my own thoughts on each one. So this is what Throwaway 547239 has to state. Throw away because I don't want my friends following my main account to think I'm insane. Alright, so let me preface this real fast by saying that I do firmly believe there is life out there somewhere in the universe. Whether or not it is intelligent is another question, and I'm skeptical of the stereotypical quote-unquote alien. On the other hand, I saw something in the sky tonight for the second time that I can't explain, and it's honestly freaking me out a little. This post is going to be long, so bear with me. I used to deliver newspapers, which was primarily working early hours of the morning, 2 a.m. to 8 a.m. at the latest, so it was dark as I was delivering. I've always been a bit of a stargazer, so I look at the sky while delivering papers, and a few months into the job, I'm looking at the sky as I'm walking to someone's door, and I see a couple of red lights in the sky. I think it was 3 lights if I remember correctly. At first I thought it was a plane, but it appeared to be completely still. I didn't think anything of it, but when it actually started to move, that's when I started to get a bit creeped out. It was almost as if the lights moved back just a little and then forward again, and suddenly shot into the distance. And when I say shot into the distance, I mean in an instant, it had completely disappeared. I saw this all with my own eyes. It was a clear night, not a single cloud in the sky, and it was just gone in a split second. I have no way of describing it other than how it looks in the movies. It generally moved and looked like it warped into hyperspeed or something, or went through some kind of void. I know how crazy it sounds, but I know what I saw. I never mentioned it to anyone else because I thought they would look at me like I was crazy. I had no way explaining what it was, so there was no point in ever mentioning it. It could have possibly been explained away by something rational, who knows? I never saw any news of it mentioned. This was around January or February, I believe. Now I think I saw it again tonight. So I was watching TV with my mom. There's a giant window behind the couch, and I was sitting in the living room at the time. It's a pretty clear night with a few clouds. We were joking around when she starts to stare at something behind my head. I asked her what she was looking at, and she tells me to look at the lights in the sky behind me. I look, and I see a few red lights. They look like the same lights I saw when I was delivering papers. She tells me that the light was white at first and coming towards us, and then when she saw it, it was almost as if they noticed and suddenly turned around. One white light turned into 3 red lights that I was now seeing. So we both go by the window and look at this, and starts to move. It turns around and then turns back into that white light. But here's the weird part. This was no plane and no helicopter. Whatever this was not moving in a straight line. As my mom and I were watching these lights in the sky, it dashes in a circular sort of motion. It's hard to describe, but it was almost as if it went around in an oval sort of motion and then zipped into the distance the same way. it also completely disappeared in an instant. Bear in mind, when we saw this moving, it went fast. I have never in my life seen something move in the sky like this had, and never in my life have I seen something in the sky move as quickly as this did. I honestly don't have words. It's so difficult to describe exactly what I saw, and I'm sorry to say I didn't get it on video. My mom and I both went outside to try and find it, but couldn't. I'm just kind of freaked out by it all. What do you guys think? Am I just insane? I don't know what I saw. Maybe there's a rational explanation for it. Still, it leaves me wondering. It doesn't sit well with me that this is the second time I've seen something like this in such a small time span. And then that's it. That's everything that this user, throwaway547239, had to state. So let's go ahead and let's talk about some of the details associated with this story or with this encounter. For starters, it's interesting that this was something that occurred once and then twice in this person's life. I could easily see them having this happen while they're delivering newspapers. Perfect time. Out there in the middle of the night, out there by themselves, and like they stated, not a single cloud in the sky. It would be a perfect opportunity for them to be looking upwards at the sky and then seeing what they saw as far as a red light at first, and then the way it almost went into warp speed or hyperspeed as they described it, going into someplace else. All of that visualization I could absolutely see. And way past when I was doing some very late night jobs, let's say at some fast food, that at the time when I was driving home, I remember seeing these people out there, the ones that used to deliver newspapers. I don't really think that's even going on these days, is it? But either way, though, I remember them going out there and they had those stacks of newspapers in their car, completely weighing the car down. You could just imagine them doing this all night long, all by themselves. And again, that's why it's a perfect situation for this. But how about that? They thought that there was just this one-off item, but no, all of a sudden, this thing seemed to follow wherever this guy was. All of a sudden, it was there. And the part that creeped me out was the fact that the mom was saying it was almost as if it was heading straight to their house when all of a sudden it stopped when it realized it was being watched. Talk about creepy, right? That almost got the hairs on my back of my neck going. But yeah, they went outside, didn't see anything else except for the familiarity of this thing almost going to warp speed, and then that was it. Who knows, maybe we might see a third encounter with regards to this thing. I absolutely believe that what they saw, yes, was a UFO. The fact, the way it looked, the way it moved, and then of course the speed that it had, no sound as well. Nothing like that like you would expect from any other large aircraft. Absolutely, this was something that they were seeing in terms of a UFO. Next one has to do with this. The next encounter comes from a user called Not Your Average Gay Guy. How about that for a user ID, right? Not Your Average Gay Guy. And they wrote it as such: sleep paralysis or an encounter. So let's go ahead and let's talk about this experience here. So this is what the user said. When I was a young child, mid to late 90s, I used to have what I believed at that time to be very vivid nightmares. I would be laying in my own bed, completely unable to move any part of my body except my eyes or make any kind of sound, and the room would become strangely lit, and what I can only describe as fog from dry ice would cover the floor. At that time, I would hear a strange noise similar to a baby cooing or stirring, but not quite. If you play Minecraft, the noises which ghosts make when they're just moving around is almost a dead ringer. And then these two human-like entities would walk into my room. They would be wearing gray clothing like sweatsuits, and their faces, as I remember, were akin to hockey masks, but the entire eye holes were black. Think of it like Shy Guy from Mario. There was a height difference between the two, similar to that what one expects between a man and a wife, yet there were no defining features of either, aside from what could be indicative of gender. And so upon entering my bedroom, they would very slowly yet steadily approach me, tilting their heads side to side as one might do when approaching a dog or a newborn baby. They would draw closer and closer until they reached the edge of my bed, at which time they would just as slowly bend over me until their faces were feet from mine. I experienced this at least a dozen times, and each time was the same, but I have no memory of what would happen after they bent over me. Around this same time period, I would experience nightmares where I was alone outside in the middle of the night in the grass or near the picnic table beside our lawn, unable to move or make any noise. And I remember waking up from these episodes and sometimes being in my own bed and sometimes being outside and having to make my way back inside with no memory at all of how I got out there in the first place. As an adult, I was performing research on sleep paralysis, having never heard of it before, and realized that what I described above could be a textbook example of it. And I thought about this for about 5 years until I described these episodes to my doctor and nurse during a routine checkup, and they both said it had sounded like I'd been visited by aliens. I'm still leaning towards sleep paralysis, but you never know. Then that's it. That's everything that Not Your Average Gay Guy said about his encounter. So lots of interesting things here. For starters, here you have another situation. I've highlighted that with some of the other encounter videos where it has to do with sleep paralysis. In fact, some of you have already been posting comments about sleep paralysis as well. Luckily, I've never had to face that before, but I've had some friends and relatives that have stated that they've had that type of freakish encounter, and it's either A, something natural, and natural in the sense that it's just whatever your body is doing to create that sleep paralysis, or B, it's related to this, involving grays or aliens, someone else that is able to just hold someone still, or C, which I consider the worst, is it's associated with like demons and those type of really dark entities like shadow people and so on. And so either one of those could be one of these, but in this case, here's he describing something like absolutely looks like the classic grays. I mean, the way he was stating it as far as even the gray clothing and then having those eye holes that were completely black and then having them almost like same. There was difference between the two of them, same, look, but different heights. It definitely made me think of having grays that were visiting him. They were in turn keeping him paralyzed while he was awake. And then after they bent over to inspect them, that's where things just took a whole different turn, to the point where he was also experiencing that missing time, that frustrating missing time that you hear from other cases tied to alien encounters, where people suddenly realize, wait, what happened to the last hour or two? Something along those lines. And then they never really get that memory back unless it's forced or some way by accident it comes back. But yeah, imagine how creepy that is. Having these things, the way he described it, happening multiple times to him, having these things visit him and then drop him off either there at the house or outside, like you said, by the lawn or picnic table. No, thank you. This is probably the worst of the encounters that you can have when it comes to alien encounters. Just really creepy stuff. Let's see if he has any more updated news afterward or any more updates on encounters. Last one has to do with this, posted by a guy by the name of Pansy Mantid. Their title is 3 Years Apart. My non-believer mother and I found out we had the same UFO experience. Another title that pretty much tells the whole story right there. So this is what they have to say. For a bit of preface, my mother is mostly not a believer of aliens. If anything, she's one of the, even if they did exist, we'd never meet them in our lifetime people, and they'd probably just be amoebas or another planet types people. I'm a big believer in aliens and the paranormal, but previous to this encounter, I had no experiences with aliens/UFOs. So in 2016, I was making the long drive home from a friend's house around 2 a.m. The highway was relatively empty, save for a few truckers, and at the time of my experience, I was the only car on the road. As I passed over a bridge, I saw a massive, oval-shaped green light just floating in the distance ahead of me. If you extended your arm in front of you and held up your thumb, it was about that size. It hovered in place for about 15 seconds, then moved down to the ground relatively slowly. It seemed close enough that I exited the highway and drove through back roads in the area it seemed to have landed, but never found anything. I called my friend, freaking out about it immediately afterward, and when I got home, posted on several UFO spotting sites and looked to see if anyone else in my town had seen similar things, but was only met with dead ends. I didn't tell any of my family, mostly because they all don't really believe in that sort of thing, but I did tell several of my coworkers and friends. So cut to 3 years later, in 2019, I was at a dimly lit park very late at night with my mom playing Pokemon Go. I joked about it being scary out there and that maybe we get attacked or abducted by aliens. She got annoyed with me and told me, "You seriously can't joke like that. I saw some blank a few months ago that's still freaking me the blank out." I laughed at her. Most of you know it's kind of fun to rile up your mom sometimes, but I also asked her to elaborate. I was very interested in what she had seen to have freaked her out like this. She started by telling me she saw this massive green light and my stomach dropped. I asked her if she was blanking with me and was met with mostly confusion on her part. She told me she wasn't and proceeded to start talking about its size and how it just hovered there. I finished her story for her and asked if what she had also seen, then slowly moved down to the ground and seemed as if it landed there. At this point, we both freaked each other out, so we both thought we had already told one another the story, but we truly hadn't. And this is the closest I'd seen my mom come to accepting the idea of aliens/UFOs interacting with us. The place I live is a big clump of three major cities and then a lot of small surrounding towns. I had my experience in one of the major cities, and she had hers in one of the smaller towns, and they're about a 40-minute highway drive apart. I mostly get freaked about how many people I've shared this with, and none of them have had the same experience, but it just so happens my mother has had the exact same one. The other thing I think about is that I live close to a big government nuclear facility, so I always figure we're a good target for a weird blank. Since then, I've not heard of a similar experience with the green light, and I've always wondered if it's a testing thing they're doing there or if it has something to do with my family or what. Honestly, I just thought I'd share here. So the too long didn't read version is I saw a green light in the sky, found out my mom had too, 3 years later and 2 towns over. And then that's it. That's everything that the user Pansy Mantid said with this story. So lots of good things to talk about here. Once again, it involves the dead of night, 2 a.m., with regards to these UFO encounters. Always frustrating, right? You wonder like if this ever happens like during the broad daylight in a city. Talk about a perfect opportunity for the UFO making an impact. But no, it's always out there in the middle of nowhere between towns, between long drive distances at night. But yes, they saw this massive oval-shaped green light and the way it was just floating and then did like an almost optical illusion. Once it seemed to land at a nearby place, this guy actually took the time and the bravery to go around and try to find it. I don't know if I would necessarily do that on my end. Let me know in the comments if you would when it comes to that. I know my limits, especially when it comes to ghosts and hunting like ghosts and so on. So I would probably do the same thing when it comes to UFOs. I see something landing nearby, I'm not going to go out there. But he did. And when he went out there, there was nowhere to be seen. That led him to surmise afterward if there was something else, maybe even natural, like involving the government and some secret nuclear facilities that are housing all these sorts of weird tests. Interesting stuff. But yes, the other interesting item was the fact that not only did he have that experience, but his mom did too. Makes you wonder, is this, even though this was, the mom having the experience, different locations, makes you wonder if they in turn are being targeted by these things. Obviously, one appearing to one person, the other one appearing to the other member of the family. Makes you wonder if it's too much of a coincidence or if it's like truly something where they're being targeted. Just pretty interesting stuff. Also, the fact that she in turn is almost turning towards believing towards UFOs now, especially with what she had seen on there. But otherwise, I wish they would have mentioned more about the location. That's what makes some of these stories frustrating. If there was a location listed, the fact that they mentioned that it was like a between three cities and so on, that would definitely give more opportunities for those of you listening, if you're nearby those locations, to know exactly where they're talking about and then give your own experiences. But that's pretty much it. Those are the 3 scary encounters associated with aliens and UFOs. If anybody has any more info, anything else I might have missed, then please post those comments below. What about those of you that have sleep paralysis when it comes to other type of encounters? Those are always neat to hear when it comes to the comments. So please post those below too. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care. Bye.